Well, welcome everybody. It's great to have you all with us today. My name is Nikki Wright from Wright Communications, and we're very excited today to bring you a webinar where we look at how to engage people in sustainability during COVID, which is no easy feat. So today we have two wonderful guest speakers. We have Leela Gantman, who is the Corporate Relations Director at Spark, and we have Julie Roberts, who is the Sustainability Manager from Mitre. So Leela has had a very distinguished career in public relations and corporate communications management, starting out in Australia in agencies and working her way up through various corporates from Anne, Fletcher, and she's now coming up 2 years at Spark. So really interested to hear from Leela about her experience. And then for Julie, Julie and I actually worked together for some time when Julie was head of sustainability for Croxley, which became Officemax. And I'm very familiar with Julie. She's a brilliant sustainability manager, and I have no doubt we'll have many practical things that they're doing at Mitre, which you might find of interest to your own company. So really today is all about how do we unpack the opportunities, the learnings, and recognise some of the challenges to continue engaging with staff and consumers on sustainability when everyone's focus is on the immediate COVID concern. I know for myself, there's certain things that you have no control over, right? You're used to using your reusable coffee cup, but now, of course, we're not allowed to do that, and we have to buy, the coffee cup the cafe has, for example, or you're at the supermarket and you want to buy naked fruit and vegetables, and for a time there, especially during last year's lockdown, with hygiene and sanitisation being much more important at the time. You didn't have that opportunity to do things how you might have wanted to. And so over time, these things sort of creep into your way of living, and you might lose that motivation to do the right thing. So how do we keep motivated on the sustainability cause whilst also heeding the rules of COVID interactions? Also just thinking about, the work from home situation and the mental health challenges that poses for many New Zealanders. And just how do we take care of ourselves and others in the workplace? So that social aspect of sustainability very much being to the fore at the moment. So with that being the case, how do you maintain your environmental programs and keep momentum for those as well? With a lot more packaging and, waste in general, face masks, all these things that we didn't have to contend with previously in our waste streams. How do we manage these new forms of waste? And how do we, when there's extreme weather events, climate change obviously becomes more, it's more in our face, and we sort of take notice of what's happening on that front. When those aren't, when there isn't the bushfire in Australia to look to, when there isn't the major global conference taking place, how do we maintain people's awareness and recognition that climate change is actually the bigger concern and something that we still need to keep really focused on? So there's a whole range of things really that we're all contending with at the moment, and so many things outside our control, which makes it very difficult. But we have Leela and Julie here today to help us navigate what they are doing at their organisations. So I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then at the end, there'll be the opportunity for question and answer. So during the presentation, please just type me a question and we'll endeavour to get to those at the end. So at 12, so just kicking things off now. So Leela, I'm going to start with you. You've got a role that spans a really large number of organisations, stakeholders, I should say. So from customers to the community, and with the advent of COVID, what changes have you seen in how these stakeholders perceive sustainability?
Yeah, it's a great question. And thank you for the lovely introduction, Nikki. So I think actually COVID has, in a way, been quite helpful to elevate the importance of sustainability. Whilst I do recognise the world is now more cluttered and one-dimensional in a way, everyone sits waiting for the 1 p.m. news update and everything is about COVID. On the flip side, I think it's helped to show how interconnected everything is within New Zealand, and a number of other significant sustainability challenges that we have as a country have all contributed to the impact of COVID and how we're going to respond from it. So if you think of things like climate change and the fact we'll have to be transitioning to low carbon economy at the same time as recovering from COVID, housing and the compounding impact that poor housing has had on the COVID, the rates of COVID in the community, things like mental health, underinvestment in our healthcare sector, all of those things are intertwined. And actually, COVID has brought that to the fore. And what that then means is if you're going to fix all of those things, you need that system wide approach. And that means focusing on us as a collective, the country as a collective versus individual people or individual companies. And in my view, that's quite helpful for sustainability because by its very nature, it requires that kind of system-wide collective effort. So the more we're elevating that discussion in the community, the better. But more specifically within Spark, I think I've always been a big believer that for sustainability to have impact with your people and your stakeholders, it has to be core business. It can't be this nice little project sitting off to the side that the sustainability team runs and no one else has a look into or has any skin in the game on. Otherwise, it's kind of seen more in that traditional community investment light that used to be the norm. So for me, it's more about how do you integrate it into the BAU? How do you make it part of core strategy so that people see it as a material and important issue? For Spark, I think with COVID, we've actually been in a really favourable position in that regard, because if you think of our purpose as a business, it's to help all of New Zealand win big in a digital world. And really, our world has become more digital almost overnight from 2020. We've seen a rapid acceleration of digitisation. And what that brings with it is a whole lot of other challenges in terms of how you're managing COVID. So whether people are able to work, learn and connect from home, how you're tracing with COVID apps, vaccine passports that will no doubt be on the news agenda today, I suspect. The lack of digitisation in our healthcare sector amongst small to medium businesses, the huge digital divide we have in New Zealand, it's all been exposed to the bone really through COVID. So for us, it's been about how do we demonstrate that the sustainability focus areas we're already working on are going to be a critical part of the COVID recovery. And then you're kind of elevating that discussion to an area where everyone's attention is already on. And so, you know, it's no different to any other comms. What does your audience care about? And how do you connect what you're doing to that?
Thanks, Leela. That's really interesting. And certainly that digital divide, like you say, it has been exposed, hasn't it? It's
Yep.
Julie, for you, you've got a very large number of front-facing staff. How have you adapted your approach to engage the business in sustainability to accommodate this large number of people that have to be communicated with?
Yeah, so tēnā koutou everybody. Yeah, it's very dynamic for us. So we have our frontline team members and they're very operational and transactional focused. So it's making sure that our messaging is really clear. So things like waste and recycling services, what's happening if we've got a certain division or a provider that's in lockdown 4, so level 4 versus being in level 3 or 2, etc. It's very focused on them. So, you know, they want to know, how do I dispose of my single-use mask? Can I switch to a more reusable mask? So it's working with our in-store sustainability leads and making sure that we're communicating about, you know, this is what we want you to do and how you can do it. And, you know, touching on your point about what services aren't available at the moment, etc. So that's been really important to us. We were due to launch our national pot recycling program. So there's been lots of communication around that to make sure that they don't have to focus on stuff that isn't in the now. And when will we be able to repick that up and work with them? And I think too, we've sort of optimized on this as well. So we have a large number of backdoor team members who do the accounts receivable, accounts payable. And so those teams are currently working on their carbon footprints. So we've been engaging with them and making sure that they can still get on with that whilst they are working at home. So sort of optimizing on the fact that they're not helping the front end of the of our retail box or trade departments, and actually making sure that we're still focused. What's really important to Mitre 10, so we are a workforce of about 5,000 to 6,000 team members, and so wellbeing and mental health has been really prominent for us. So making sure that we're meeting everybody's needs. So we've got team members that just go with the flow, and then we have other team members that are genuinely concerned. So it's making sure that we're listening to them and working with them. Being an owner-operator, we can kind of divide that up a little bit. So whilst we have standard operating procedures that we push through the business, members can also go and do their own thing. So we've had one member actually organise vaccinations at their site, so working with a local pharmacy to make that happen, and then working with the community around that as well. So that's been meeting the needs of our team members, but just explaining to them and talking to them.
It's really cool to have, to actually work within the local community to act things like that.
Yeah.
I'm quite interested also, Julie, because your role, when you start talking about wellbeing, it sort of expands into HR, doesn't it? So do you feel that the role of sustainability manager is sort of got a bit of role creep?
Yeah, so we are a big beast. So just to acknowledge that, probably not the right terminology, but you'll get my gist. So my role is truly around sustainability in an environmental perspective. But there is a marriage that's played out with this, so around people, around community, and we do have individual teams that focus on these areas, but then there's a huge partnership where we do make sure that we're crossing over it and working together. So, a sustainability lead will come to me on what would be deemed to be a health and safety concern, but there's obviously a rollover on the impact of that disposal of that product, or so we need to make sure that we're entwining it so that it becomes part of our DNA, and that's the challenge that we've got. But that is really important. Communication is absolutely the most important, making sure that everyone's across everything so they know that, yes, we want you to wear a mask, and if you use a single-use mask, but also this is how you dispose of it, or if you use a reusable one, this is, what we want you to do with the fibre, Leela,
for you, thinking here about innovation, because during times of crisis, whether it's COVID or climate, innovation is key. So what innovations have you seen across Spark in the last 18 months or so in terms of communicating with your customers and staff about sustainability?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of all become wrapped up within the COVID response, really. One of the things that I think the government has done really well is, at least at the outset of COVID, was setting expectations really clearly about when you could expect to hear something new. Like any crisis situation, people tend to worry and get panicky when they don't know what's coming next. Obviously with COVID, none of us know what's really coming next, but we all know that at 1 p.m. we get an update. We all know that post-cabinet we get an update. So you've kind of got these things that are coming, and that provides some level of reassurance. So we took the approach of almost modeling that internally. So every time there's a significant update, so for example, yesterday, as soon as the press conference finishes, we get a note out to all our people from Jolie, our CEO, and it explains, this is what we just heard from the government, and this is what it means for Spark. So obviously we're working in the background on that during the day ahead. We've got around 5,000 people in really different roles across the business. So you've got frontline staff, people working in retail. We've got people based in our customers' businesses. We have teams who operate emergency services like 111. So we're going to have different protocols for them. Some of them have to be on site, others can work from home. So we try and keep it more, at a high level. This is what's happening, and then we enable the leaders to go and have more detailed conversations. So having that regular approach, I think, is really critical. Then we've done things like you've mentioned, wellbeing. That's a really big focus for Spark. It's definitely led out of our HR team, and where my team, the corporate relations team, acts as kind of a comms partner to HR on that. Given the kind of significant impact COVID's had, we've now implemented a new communications vehicle, which is just like an online newsletter approach, but it's more personal. So our wellbeing framework is called Mahi Tahi, and this newsletter comes out now once a week. And we've found what really works is our people connecting with each other. I'm fortunate I have a videographer in my team, actually, so he's been going around and interviewing people in the business about how are you coping, what are you doing, and they've been really engaging, quite funny videos that have been lifting spirits. So I think enabling that consistency in terms of when comms will come, but then also the connection, so that people feel a little more like they normally would when they're around their peers. And the last thing I'd say in terms of, I'm not sure any of these are huge innovations, they're kind of incremental builds, but for me, the true beauty of sustainability comms is the weaving. So again, you can do these kind of bespoke comms, like we have a newsletter that we do every quarter, and we'll always do those things. But the more that you can weave it into the core business comms, so we do a business update once a month, it should be one of the many messages that is part of that, rather than always being this bespoke thing over here. Because you're just going to get more eyeballs. People need to hear something 10 times before they remember it. So you get that repetition, and also you get the benefit of someone like your CEO talking about it, rather than just the sustainability team or a faceless newsletter. So the more that the leader is leading out with it, the more impactful it will be.
Oh, that's good. There's some good practical tips there. I really like that idea of interviewing your team and just showing it's so much more down to earth, isn't it? Rather than just the all the time. It's
yes,
like that.
And just leaders, like it should be everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Julie, the retail sector's been really heavily impacted by COVID. So what has Mitre learnt from that experience, and have you used any of those learnings to think differently about how you engage with customers on sustainability?
Great question. I think don't underestimate the power of people being at home. We've seen really high traffic in categories like gardening and DIY home improvement. So our learnings from that is making sure that we've, within the world of being able to, but, having the right products available online, and then looking at what that trend's going to look like and what we need to do. And I think it's twofold. One is because people want to make those improvements that they've probably been putting in the back of their minds to do one day. And when you're at home constantly, you're seeing it more, so you want to get it fixed. But there's also a real genuine well-being and mental health element to it. So we know that consumers want to grow their own. We know that they want to connect more with nature. So I think that's why we've seen that increase in those particular categories. I think probably with engaging with customers, some of that hasn't actually changed. So there's still a desire from from consumers to be more sustainable. We've still seen a really high traffic requirements around our Expo polystyrene program. So people wanting to know, when is that going to be re-available? Is it going to be going to this particular store? I think too, consumers are probably taps into what Leela said before, but they want to know about the life cycle of a product, or they want to know what's happening, what's the impact of this particular product, or the certification that we're promoting against a product, etc. So there's still those sorts of queries coming through, and they're still high in comparison to months prior to what we got with COVID. I think too, our learnings have been, one of my learnings in particular is we've just done a whole lot of work on our online ordering and click and collect around packaging requirements and packaging type. And that's sort of had to go out the window a little bit, which is disheartening from my own personal perspective, but it's the right call by our business. And so we haven't educated or communicated that very well to consumers. So we are getting a little bit of feedback on that, but it's just explaining why and, just the true volumes that we're dealing with. I think you always, pardon?
Just on that, there's a lot of people, for the first time might be ordering, fresh fish online, for example, and, polystyrene, that comes with that. They're not used to dealing with certain types of the waste stream. And I think there's quite a good opportunity right now to educate consumers on, what to do with that polystyrene waste that you never thought you'd have to manage at a household level.
Yeah, and so we play a part in that solution, but we're not the whole solution. And I think that's where local and central government can lift their game around educating. And I know that they've got plans to do that. And I think, that will come in time. But that is a really important part of it. And, we've been working with our supply community on that for quite a while. And we've got some policies that set clear expectations on plastic material types and types that we'll accept for our packaging moving forward. But it is a balancing act. We've got to get the product out. We've got to meet our health and safety requirements, but we've also got to be sustainable. So it's just balancing all of that and getting the right mix, so then we can still get the product out, because there's a consumer that wants that product. And then how do we meet all of that puzzle's needs?
Something that I thought was pretty cool, in my local neighbourhood in Birkenhead here, there was a large organisation that basically took it upon themselves to roll out some mental health first aid training to a range of local businesses who are having regular contact with customers during lockdown. So that's like the barber, the bakery, those kinds of people, the barista, the cafe. So I just wondered, as large organisations, what do you think can be done to support the SME community to communicate with their staff and customers on sustainability?
Yeah,
it's
a good question. I think probably where we've focused is less on how they communicate, but more on how we're supporting them, which obviously can then flow through to their own communications. But we do have quite a sizable customer base of small to medium sized businesses who tend to be the least digitised in New Zealand. And obviously when COVID first hit, there was quite a flurry of panic in terms of having to switch quickly to e-commerce or scale up call centres that used to be, one line. Even we work with Age Concern, who never had a hotline. They're just someone that my team and I work with regularly, and they needed a hotline because so many people were calling in, just like really little examples like that. So there's the practical work of actually supporting them to get there, but then there's also the broader kind of journey you need to go on in terms of training and skills uplift there as well. So one of the things we've been working on is the Digital Boost program that the government and MB have collaborated on, and Jolie now chairs that. So this is all about how do we bring that community on the journey and provide things that are affordable to enable them to do that, which obviously would then flow through to how they communicate with their people. Another area we looked at last year, actually, we ran a recharge campaign for our small to medium businesses where we provided them with the same access that our people have to certain services that support wellbeing. So, we have discounted Les Mills gym memberships, and we have access to a meditation and breathing program called Take a Breath, for example. So we kind of gifted that on to our small business customers, recognizing they really took the brunt of the pain of those lockdowns. So I think obviously their businesses are theirs to run, and we're not going to interfere there, but the more that we can support them to support themselves and their own well-being and their own effectiveness and productivity, then I think that will flow through.
Absolutely. That's awesome. We haven't had any questions through today from anyone watching in, but I've got one final question. Maybe I'll direct that to you, Julie, and then we'll wrap things up. Just wondering if you might be able to share with everyone what has been the single most impactful action that you have taken at Mitre 10 to ensure that sustainability is still front of mind for stakeholders during COVID?
The reassurance that we're still launching pot recycle.
Yeah.
Look, that's, I joke about it, but it is really, our gardening team members are really engaged in this space.
Yeah.
And they want to do the right thing by the PP plastic pots that we've got. And so it sounds a bit silly, but it is very factual. You know, they want to know that and being respectful too, we've actually had to delay it 3 times now because of COVID. So, you know, they know it's all coming and they know it's all ready to go. We just need the right timing to be able to do it. So it's just keeping them engaged and working with them. Pot Recycle is our plant and seedling pot product stewardship. So consumers will be able to, once they've planted their beautiful plant and seedlings, and vegetable seedlings in particular, they'll be able to return that the pots to Mitre 10, and then we will recycle them and the label, and then we turn them into new pots. So the grey pots that you see in gardening centres today is made from a trade partner called Zealandia, and they're one of New Zealand's largest nurseries. And what they use is they use a different post-consumer material to make their pots. And moving forward, it will be the plant and seedling pots. So it's a true circular economy program, and it is designed to basically go for years and years and years, because PP plastic's actually a really good plastic type, and it has its place. So so I think that's probably the one thing I'm hanging my hat on, is just getting that all out to our consumers.
Absolutely.
So future focused.
Yeah. Okay, so hang on to your pots if you're doing any spring.
Clean them and then return them, please. Yeah.
Clean and return. All right. So I just want to thank you so much, Leela and Julie, for joining us today and sharing your experience of this most recent lockdown and the way that you've managed to maintain some momentum on sustainability. And also to anyone watching, we have another webinar coming up on Thursday. So mark this in your diaries. It's at 9:30, and SBC will be hosting Kieran James, who's the Deputy Chair of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So very lucky to have them joining us. And also that will be with the Chief Executive of ERM. It's the largest pure play sustainability consultancy. So Kieran is going to be talking about how COVID-19 is forcing business to reimagine resilience. And so I think we can all learn a thing or two from them for sure. So thank you again. If you haven't had lunch, please go and enjoy, and take care and take a breath, having a bit of meditation, Leela. That sounds like a good idea.
Highly recommend you looking into it. Yeah, it's very cool.
Okay, take care,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.